So thank you very much, Alex, for joining today. So we are very lucky to have Alex Witham from Landbay joining us. Landbay is a big intermediary mortgage lender, and we're very grateful for your time, Alex. I know you're very busy. Just before we get started, just obviously want to be clear, today is a general kind of purpose chat and for information purposes. So none of the information that we discussed today should be relied upon from advice. And of course, Landbay and Alex, who could self as well, are not providing any advice in this session. We're just talking around some of the things to be considered around buy-to-lets. And thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So just considering another type of property we touched on, which was multi-unit freehold blocks. It's a very kind of odd term, multi-unit freehold blocks. What is a multi-unit freehold block?
So a multi-unit freehold block are either referred to as an MUFB, multi-unit freehold block, or an MUB. Again, it's jargon. Effectively, what it means is there are multiple self-contained units under one title. Usually it's a freehold title, which is perhaps formerly a large Victorian or Edwardian house that's been split at some point into little flats, if you like. They could be, studio flats, little bedsit style flats, or even larger flats. But the owner has not then split them onto their own leasehold title. So
Yeah.
effectively, you have multiple units on the original freehold without their own separate leases. Less common, you can have a multi-unit leasehold block, which is where you have the same multiple units that have been created on a self-contained basis that are on one large long lease. They are very rare. Your mortgage options typically are a little bit more restricted on a multi-unit leasehold block than they are on a multi-unit freehold block due to them being less common. But both are mortgageable. But again, because they are a more complex type of property, and in the event that they are repossessed and resold, the market that can buy that property off the bank or the lender is reduced because you can't obtain a owner-occupier mortgage from a high street bank on a multi-unit freehold block. So for that reason, usually the mortgage options are limited, and some lenders would want some experience before you are eligible for those products as well. The things that you need to really consider with a multi-unit freehold block is if you are buying I'll pick this as an example, a house split into 3 flats, and you are looking at the mathematics and the numbers thinking flats in that area of that size are worth £200,000 each. Therefore, this is 3 on one title. It must be worth 600,000. That is quite often not the case, because remember back to my point a few moments ago, the mortgage options are restricted. In the event of repossession or resale, the options from a buyer is restricted because you are not selling that property to an owner-occupier. You are only selling it to an investor. So usually there will be what's called a block discount or a block valuation on that property rather than, let's call it, a sum of parts. That property is not worth £200,000 times 3, not typically anyway. It is worth perhaps that less a certain percentage for the hassle factor of it being a block sale, if that makes sense. So that's a key consideration in an MUFB. But typically you'd find an MUFB is a house split into flats at some point, less common, purpose-built, left on the original title.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, as you say, they're not as common, but they are there, and there's intricacies to them. Okay. Thank you for that, Alex. Really informative.
There's often, sorry to interrupt, there's often a strategy of buying an MUFB, buying a multi-unit freehold block, and looking at, can I split it into leases? And that's often a strategy that works well for people because, going back to what I mentioned, the saleability is impaired on a block sale basis. But if you acquire that asset and then remove that blocker by creating separate leasehold titles and making them self-contained, you could then sell it to, John Smith, a first-time buyer wanting to buy a flat
Anyone.
to
Yeah.
live in. So a strategy not to be discounted is purchasing an MUFB from a landlord or a developer or what have you, and looking at can I buy this and add value to that by splitting it into long leases. And that does work really well for people, but not every property is going to be suitable for that. You know, access issues, possible defects with the title. There are lots of things that need to be considered, but we have a number of clients with Landbay that have executed that strategy of buy and split into leases that has worked extremely well and have been very, very lucrative for them. So certainly if if people are thinking of what sort of strategy should I be looking at, that's one that's less commonly known and does need to be explored.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the MUFBs, multi-unit freehold blocks, I think something that's come up occasionally is around the utilities and how they're connected. Sometimes is it some of the building is being designed or it's been built with the utilities all part of the same building, whereas opposed to, like you say, if you're going to go down the road and have separate leases for each individual flat is going to need to have its own separate utilities, gas, electricity, water, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right, and that's one of those considerations that's often overlooked because when you're doing a viewing, your primary thought process is the structure sound, the fabric of the building, is that good? Is it in a nice area? Is the demand going to be good? You're perhaps less focused on, are there RCD consumer units in each individual flat? Are there gas meters in each individual flat? Often these are secondary or not thought of considerations at all, but these are the things that you need to be armed with, and you need to have the education before you do your viewings to make sure that it works. Because if you're going to buy something intending to buy and split it into leases, and then after you've acquired that property, you realize that legally you can and the planning will allow you to do that, but you've overlooked the fact that there's only one set of utilities coming into that property, and you now need to dig up the road and kind of jump off the mains, put in new. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
your costs significantly ramp up because of that. So absolutely, you need to have consideration for things like utilities and are they sub-metered and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's that due diligence, isn't it? And you've just got to allow for every single part of the transaction in terms of when you've bought it and then afterwards maintaining it and all those things you've just mentioned. And again, just having that dream team around you, but also, just doing that upfront due diligence. It doesn't take too long to check these things out. And it's free to check things most of the time upfront. The problem just comes if you don't check them, and then fast forward 4 months, you bought the property, and then I can't do that. That becomes a problem.
And it happens. We see it. We see it quite a lot, unfortunately, and all it does is it skews the GDV and your projects, and your sums just get thrown out. So it's just important to really analyze every deal. You have to be buying with your head, not your heart. You need to really think through the deal and know what you're looking at before you take the plunge and go ahead and do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, please ask below and hit subscribe below so you don't miss out on our next episode.